Have you ever heard of a country where world powers go and lose? A place that's been at war for over 40 years and no one, not the Soviets, not the US, has ever truly won? Let me take you to Afghanistan, the country that refuses to be conquered. Let's talk about Afghanistan, a country that's earned the nickname the graveyard of empires. Sounds intense, right? Well, that's because it is. This place has seen war after war, generation after generation. No one seems able to hold on to it, not for long at least. And it all starts with its rugged, mountainous terrain, and an even tougher people who just don't give up. But why? Why has Afghanistan been in conflict for more than 40 years? What is it about this country that makes it so unconquerable? And what can we learn from its people? Let's rewind to 1979. The Soviet Union, the big scary superpower of the time, thought they could march right into Afghanistan and take control. You know, crush the local resistance, set up shop and call it a day. But that's not how things went down. The Afghans, they fought back hard. The Soviet soldiers had all the tanks, the helicopters and the military might you'd expect from a superpower. But the Afghan fighters, the Mujahideen, had something even stronger, the mountains. These guys knew every twist and turn of their land, using it to their advantage. Soviet troops were getting picked off in ambushes, battling guerrilla tactics they just couldn't handle. After nearly 10 years and 15,000 Soviet soldiers lost, the Soviet Union threw in the towel. They left Afghanistan in defeat. Sound familiar? It was like their version of Vietnam, an absolute quagmire. Now, if we're talking about real Afghan resilience, you've got to hear about Ahmad Shah Massoud, known as the Lion of Panjshir. This guy was a legend. The Soviets, they could never fully capture his territory, the Panjshir Valley. Massoud knew every inch of that land and used it to outsmart a massive Soviet army. And later on, he did the same with the Taliban. Imagine leading your people through constant war, outlasting superpowers and holding on to your freedom. That's Massoud. Sadly, he was assassinated in 2001, but his legacy lives on in the hearts of many Afghans as a symbol of strength and courage. Fast forward to 2001, right after the tragic events of 9/11. The United States decided to invade Afghanistan, aiming to topple the Taliban and destroy Al-Qaeda. And just like the Soviets, they thought it would be quick and decisive. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Here's a mind-blowing fact. The US war in Afghanistan lasted 20 years. That's longer than most of us have been alive. And yet, after all those years, trillions of dollars and so much loss, the US finally withdrew in 2021. What happened after? The Taliban swept right back into power almost overnight. So, how did this happen? To understand Afghanistan's history, you have to get one thing straight. Afghanistan is not like most countries. Its geography is brutal. Think jagged mountains, narrow valleys and extreme weather. This isn't just difficult terrain, it's a fortress. Foreign armies get bogged down, ambushed and lost in it. But there's more to it. Afghanistan's tribal culture is incredibly strong. The people there are fiercely independent and they've been resisting foreign invaders for centuries. From Alexander the Great to the British Empire to the Soviets, and now the US, Afghanistan has always had this spirit of defiance. It's like part of their DNA. Here's something wild. There's a nickname for the US war in Afghanistan. It's called the Forever War. Why? Because every time foreign forces tried to take control, the Taliban would just melt back into the countryside, regroup, and come back stronger. It felt like this endless cycle, which is why so many say Afghanistan is impossible to control for long. But let's not forget the people who have lived through this. Imagine being a child born in Afghanistan today. Your parents, your grandparents, maybe even your great-grandparents, they've all lived through war. That's just, they're normal. There's a heartbreaking real story of Malala Maiwand, a journalist who fought for women's rights and education in Afghanistan despite the constant threats. She was tragically killed in 2020. But her courage, like so many others in Afghanistan, shows just how determined these people are to fight for a better future, no matter the odds. So, why can't anyone win in Afghanistan? It's not just the geography or the culture or the history of resistance, it's all of those things. Afghanistan is a place where the rules of modern warfare just don't work. You can invade it, but you can't control it. You can try to change it, but it will change you. The Afghans have an incredible strength that keeps them fighting, surviving, and yes, even rebuilding, no matter how many times their country is torn apart. And the big question remains, will Afghanistan ever see peace? One last fun fact before we wrap this up. Afghanistan's national sport is called buzkashi. It's basically goat grabbing. Players ride on horseback and try to grab a goat carcass and get it into a goal. It's kind of like rugby on horses, but way more intense. And in a weird way, it symbolizes the strength, endurance and toughness of the Afghan people, qualities that have kept them going through all these years of conflict. So after hearing all this, do you think anyone will ever truly win in Afghanistan? Or is this just the cost of centuries of conflict, geography and culture that's too strong to break? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments and don't forget to follow for more eye-opening stories like this one.